call themselves pro-life are exactly who they are. Right-wing evangelical Christians. Don't tell other people what to do. Let people do what they want with their own bodies. I don't want to interfere in your life. If you are a woman and you want to get an abortion, I don't care whether it's the 3rd month or the 4th month, whatever, and that is a personal decision between you, your family, the people involved, and your physician, I don't want to get involved. Do what you want to do. Just like the vaccinations, I don't want to get involved. That is a personal decision between you, your family, and your doctor. It goes both ways. I don't want the government involved. Not when it comes to your health, not when it comes to a woman's body. I am consistent. Many of you who call yourselves pro-life, which, by the way, I don't like that term because it's more anti-abortion than pro-life. Why do I say that? Because so many Republicans vote against every government program that can help that child, especially if they're in a family that is poor. So you're not pro-life, you're anti-abortion. Just like when some people characterize Democrats as pro-abortion. No, they're not. They're pro-choice. You won't find Democrats jumping up on trampolines and having celebrations when a woman has an abortion. I'm not celebrating. It's a very difficult decision, but I don't want to take the decision away from that woman. Who the hell am I to make that decision? I don't want to force anybody to do anything. When it comes to this issue, I'm very libertarian. I don't want government involved. Why is that so hard for people to understand? Why? Why do so many people on the far right want to tell women what to do with their own bodies? Oh, but Brian, it's murder. Guess what? That's your opinion. That's your characterization, not mine. So if you think it's murder, guess what? Then don't have an abortion. If you think the vaccines are poison, then don't get vaccinated. Why is that such a difficult concept for people to understand? Just like if you don't like a radio show, then don't listen. If you don't like a TV show, don't watch the TV show. If you don't want to get a car that's green, then get a car a different color. Nobody's forcing you to get a green car. Why is that such a difficult concept for so many Americans? I don't understand. Why do you want to make people's lives more difficult and force your religion down their throat? Why? Why won't you let somebody live their life if they're transgender and leave them alone? Now, you can say, oh, well, if you want to wear a dress, go ahead. But I don't want you doing this, this, and this. No, just leave them alone and let them live their life. If two people that are gay want to marry each other, why don't you just stay out of it and let them live their life? I don't want to hear the excuses, oh, I don't have a problem with it. Just don't indoctrinate my kids. They're not. It's not happening. Just because somebody says it's okay to be gay or it's okay to be transgender is not indoctrinating your kids, you fools. They're not. Drag queen readers are not indoctrinating children. They're just not. Teachers are not saying you better be gay or you better have transgender surgery. It's not happening in this country, just like when Republicans bring up critical race theory. It's a joke. It's a joke. It's not happening. This is just an example of scare tactics from those on the far right and their bigoted beliefs. And then when you ask them, why are you so anti-gay? Why do you think being gay is a sin? Why are you so anti-transgender? What do? They're cowards, and they hide behind their religion. Oh, my religion told me that. So that's an excuse for your bigotry. That's what it is. Let people live their lives. Let people do what they want to do with their own bodies. If a woman wants to get an abortion, leave her alone. It's her personal dealings and her personal life and her personal health care. Leave her alone. If you think that abortion is murder, then guess what? Don't get an abortion. If you're in a family and your family core beliefs or your religious beliefs or whatever excuse you want to make is that abortion is wrong and it's murder, then guess what? Nobody's forcing you to get an abortion. Is there anybody forcing anybody to get an abortion in this country? Is there anybody saying, boy, you better get an abortion? No, they leave that choice up to the female involved. But you have all these people on the other side. They want to force you not to have an abortion. They want to force you to have a rape baby in Arizona. A victim of incest would be forced to have that child. Can you imagine? Can you imagine? Speaking of healthcare, coming up next, some would call him a controversial doctor. He did an interview on the Joe Rogan show a few years back. It went viral. Viral. Why? Well, because he says things that most doctors don't say about the vaccines, about how to treat somebody with COVID. So I got a lot of questions for Dr. Peter McCullough coming up next. You know I do, and it should be an interesting interview. Dr. Peter McCullough, controversial doctor, coming up next. We'll take a quick break. We'll be back right after this with Dr. McCullough. You're listening to Pushing the Limits right here on KSHP. Did you know that 99% of air conditioning issues start with airflow issues? Well, guess what? Pioneer Air has your back. They've been operating for 20 years in the industry within the Las Vegas area, large enough to handle all your air conditioning and heating needs, but small enough to know your first name. Pioneer Air focuses on preventative care, much like wellness checks for humans. They believe in wellness checks for air conditioning and heating systems to extend the life of the system you own. So what are you waiting for? Schedule your wellness check with Pioneer Air today. The number to call is 702-831-4840. Here's the best news. Mention this ad and you'll receive 10% off. Call Pioneer Air today. 702-831-4840. That number again, 702-831-4840.
My name is Hunter Kane, and I'm talking with you for a call to action for our veterans in Clark County. Who is Hunter Kane? Well, I'm a decorated combat veteran, veteran community leader, and candidate for Clark County Commission. Do you know no veteran has served on the commission in nearly 30 years, which is why our veteran homelessness, unemployment, and suicide rates are out of control. So here's the call to action. June 11th, vote veteran, vote Kane for Clark County. Let's rally behind someone who's been in the trenches, who knows the sacrifices, and who's committed to making a real difference. Join the campaign by searching Elect Hunter Kane on social media or go to www.electhunterkane.com.
Voters want safe gun reform, ban military assault weapons, including AR-15s, have universal background checks, and red flag laws. I am Eva Chase, a candidate for Nevada State Assembly District 16, U.S. Air Force veteran, college graduate, progressive independent candidate, fully transitioned transgender woman, former lieutenant governor candidate for Nevada in 2022, where I received 7,212 votes in the Democratic primary. Follow me on Facebook, X, Instagram, TikTok. Donate to my campaign bot fun account and stay progressive.
Who would have thought there'd be so many kids playing ice hockey in the desert? Jake Helb's Hockey Foundation and the Las Vegas Ice Warriors, founded by Gina Yusufzai 8 years ago, made it possible for families who can't afford the equipment and fees. Donate today at www.hockeyforkids.org and help us continue making a difference. Join us in supporting Jake Helb's Hockey Foundation and the Las Vegas Ice Warriors, where every kid gets a shot at the starting line. Just a reminder, our website is www.hockeyforkids.org.
Residents of Las Vegas Ward 5, are you ready for a brighter future? I would like to introduce myself, Dr. Erica Smith, your People's Choice for City Council, with a vision for progress and the fortitude to make it happen. I am committed to moving us forward. I am not just a candidate, I am a fighter for you. With myself on the City Council, you can expect a real change and a community that thrives. Vote for Dr. Erica Smith, because together we're building a better tomorrow. To learn more about me and my campaign, go to www.ericaforlasvegas.com, paid for by the Vote Dr. Smith Committee.
All right, welcome back. It is Pushing the Limits on a Wednesday. Thank you so much for joining us. So as some of you may or may not know, I almost died of COVID. I was in the ICU for 2 weeks. So it's a very passionate topic for me. The good doctors and nurses at Summerlin Hospital saved my life, and I'm very grateful for that. Sadly, so many people have lost their lives. So the gentleman we have with us right now on the line, he is the most published person dealing with heart and kidneys in the world. He's a heart doctor, kidney doctor, specialist. And, you know, there are some people in this country that see him as controversial. I'm going to ask him about that. Dr. Peter McCullough joining us right now on the show. Doctor, I really do appreciate you taking the time to join us, sir. How are you?
Thanks for having me.
Doctor, when you hear that, some people in this country that characterize you as, quote, controversial, do you agree? Do you disagree with that? How does that make you feel?
Well, I can tell you in 2019, no one considered me controversial. I had amassed an academic career. I had focused on the interface between heart and kidney disease. I was the named endowed visiting professor at Harvard. I lectured in multiple divisions there in medicine. I'd given grand rounds at the Mayo Clinic, European medicine agencies, FDA.
Mm-hmm.
So no, I was not controversial throughout the course of my career. But when COVID-19 hit, and I proposed that we should treat patients like you early at home so you don't end up in the hospital nearly
Mm-hmm.
die,
Mm-hmm.
that became quickly controversial.
Mm-hmm.
And what my opponents said is that, no, we should not treat people like you. We should let you get very, very sick and then go into the hospital where some would die. That's where things became controversial. So the question on the table is, who really took a reasonable stance here and who didn't? I'm telling you right now, I stand behind what I did. Is I developed the McCullough protocol, the most widely used multi-drug protocol in the world to treat COVID-19. We went after this. We went on offense and we didn't play defense, and we saved lives.
Let's go back to the interview you did on the Joe Rogan show, because I believe, that went viral. Were you surprised? And, some of the statements you made, again, when some people use the term controversial on that show, you and tell me if you think I'm characterizing this wrong. You made it sound like this was a planned conspiracy with how to treat COVID. Were you surprised at how viral that interview went when you went on the Joe Rogan show? And do you still feel the same way you felt years back on the Joe Rogan show when you made it sound like you believed that it was a planned conspiracy?
Well, remember when I went on Joe Rogan, that's pretty late. That's 2 years into the pandemic. So Joe missed all of 2020 and he missed nearly all of 2021 before he brings me on. I'm the first person he brought on that, was broadly published, was treating at that time hundreds of patients. Now I've treated thousands of patients. So Joe Rogan's pretty late to the story. And of course it went viral because his audience is a younger audience. Average age is in the 20s. They listen to a 3-hour interview, has a transcript. By the way, the most common term in my Joe Rogan interview transcript was monoclonal antibodies.
Mm-hmm.
That was the most common term,
Yeah.
which is, emergency use authorized products that were, which were life-saving. Operation Warp Speed. That's the most common term that Joe and I talked about.
Sure.
But when I talked about the planning of this, I cited documents. This is very important. I gave them to the Spotify producers and I cited documents. One of them, the documents I cited, is called the SPARS pandemic. This was a Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health planning seminar. And in 2017, and they published their proceedings. At that time, it was on the internet. I showed it to Joe. And they said there will be a coronavirus pandemic. That's in 2017. Now, they thought it was going to hit 2025, but they said there will be a pandemic. There'll be great controversy around treatment, and we're going to try to organize social media and the federal government and the public health agencies for a mass vaccination campaign. That's in 2017. Then in 2019 hits. Now we have Event 201. Event 201 is, the Chinese CDC director, George Gao, comes over. He's paired up with Avril Haines, our current director of national intelligence. In 2019, they say, well, yeah, for sure there's going to be a coronavirus pandemic. There's going to be great confusion regarding treatment. We're going to try to suppress all hope of treatment on social media. And again, organize the entire pandemic response around mass vaccination. Okay, that's in 2019. Now, I testified in the U.S. Senate in November 19th of 2020.
Mm-hmm.
This is the Department of Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs. Now, Ron Johnson's the chair, and Gary Peters, and he's the majority chairman, and Gary Peters is the minority. Now, I'm the lead witness, and Senator Ron Johnson gives his comments. And then Gary Peters says, before I even have a word come out of my mouth or present my research, Gary Peters says, what you're about to hear is misinformation.
Mm-hmm.
So let me tell you this. There was a planned, coordinated effort to suppress all hope of early treatment.
Why?
And well, listen, I wasn't calling the shots. You'd have to ask Gary Peters or Avril Haines, or ask the people at Johns Hopkins, ask the people who suppressed early treatment.
I understand what you're saying, but obviously that's an extremely serious claim. You don't know why they would. Usually when somebody, if in fact you're right, there would be a reason for it. Why would they suppress saving lives? Why would this be a coordinated effort? I don't understand. Why? What would be the reason for that?
In 2012, our research unit of the military, DARPA, put on their website a operational scheme. It was called the ADEPT P3 Pandemic Preparedness Planning Program, and it's still on the website today. Just type in the ADEPT P3 program on DARPA. It says they will end pandemics in 60 days using messenger RNA vaccines. That's in 2012. So our government was telegraphing to us that they aspired to end pandemics in 60 days using messenger RNA vaccines. And now, under the House Select Subcommittee for Coronavirus Investigations, Brad Wenstrup in the House has uncovered email after email where Stefan Bainzel at Moderna is emailing Ralph Barrick and Anthony Fauci and Peter Daszak. These are kind of all the co-conspirators in the creation of SARS-CoV-2. And said, listen, do you have the code? We're working on the vaccine. Within a few days of Trump announcing the pandemic, Moderna says, we've got a vaccine within a few days.
I would say that's extremely suspicious, but would you claim that Dr. Fauci was one of the creators of COVID? Do you believe that?
Yeah, the emails look like he was clearly, his whole division, NIAID, was a major supporter of the research. And so the papers that memorialize this are by first author Vineet Menachery and senior author Ralph Barrick. And the first paper was published in Nature Medicine in 2015, second one in Proceedings of the National Academy of Science in 2016. These are easy lookups for you as a journalist. You should have all this in front of you. But these papers say, listen, we have a Wuhan Institute of Virology SARS-like virus, which is poised for human emergence. And they declared in those papers that they created a chimeric, a fusion of a human coronavirus and a bat coronavirus that can invade human respiratory epithelial cells. In those papers, they've already said we've already tried a vaccine. In those papers, and in the papers, they say it's gain-of-function research, but it started before the federal moratorium. They say that. They thank Anthony Fauci's division, the National Allergy Immunology Branch, for their support. They thank the EcoHealth Alliance and Peter Daszak for coordinating all this. And they thank Dr. Xingling Li in Wuhan, China.
I hear what you're saying, Doctor. I hear what you're saying, Doctor. Just for the record, I'm not a journalist. I'm a talk show host, no more of a journalist than Joe Rogan is. And I think Joe Rogan says a lot of stupid things on his show, quite frankly. But with that being said, I think I want evidence. And I know you're saying, well, you should have this in front of you. I want evidence that proves that Dr. Fauci intentionally created a virus to try and kill millions and millions of people. I haven't seen any evidence to that or the contrary. And he's been an infectious disease doctor for decades and decades and decades and decades. But let me ask you this. To all the people that have died of COVID, there are still right-wing talk show hosts on the air today. Some of those shows you've done that claim that the vaccines are killing millions of people. I'm not saying you said this, but right-wing talk show hosts, some of them who have died, by the way, who were unvaccinated. Will you agree with me that the vaccinations as a whole for COVID did save a lot of lives, and they did a lot more good for people than bad?
Well, it will go back to the evidence. So I was giving you the evidence of Anthony Fauci's involvement in the creation of SARS-CoV-2. So I gave you the evidence, right? I cited the papers. That's evidence. And I know you're not a journalist, you're a podcaster, but you're being given evidence by a doctor in position of medical authority.
Right. But are you saying that he intentionally created a virus because he wanted millions of people to die? Is he a mass murderer? I'm trying to understand the correlation there. Are you trying to say that he created a virus to kill a bunch of people?
Those papers, again, first author Vineet Menachery, senior author Ralph Barrick. Fauci is funded out of his division Peter Daszak specifically named, Xingling Li specifically named, she's actually an author in one of the papers. The goal of the creation of the virus in those papers, which is the evidence you're asking for, is to invade a human epithelial cell.
Why isn't he been convicted? Why isn't he been convicted? Why hasn't he been charged with a crime?
You have been tracking this along, that the House Select Committee has continued investigation. Now Rand Paul is opening one up on the Senate.
Mm-hmm.
There's, books written by Rand Paul and by Robert F. Kennedy, which lay out the fact pattern that he should be convicted.
Yeah, but I mean, Rand Paul is an eye doctor, and Robert F. Kennedy Jr. has zero medical experience. I'm listening to you because you have more experience in your pinky than those two have. I don't care what books Robert F. Kennedy Jr. writes. He's a wannabe politician president, and Rand Paul is an eye doctor. I don't want to get my infectious disease information from Rand Paul, with all due respect. I want to talk to you. I want to get your opinions. I don't care what Rand Paul has to say. He's a politician, and he's been going after Dr. Fauci for years. My question is, okay, investigate. I have no problem with that. I want to see actual evidence that they can prove in a court of law to prosecute Dr. Fauci. And if they can't, I don't want to hear about it. Am I wrong in saying that, doctor?
Well, what mechanism would you suggest?
What mechanism? I want real evidence shown in a court of law that can prove that Dr. Fauci intentionally wanted to create a virus that would kill millions of people. And if they can show that evidence in a courtroom and they can prove it to a jury, then go ahead and send Dr. Fauci to jail. But until that happens, it's unproven. You can say that there's evidence here and there's evidence there, and I'm listening to you, and I want to get your take on this. That's why I wanted you on the show. But the bottom line here is, doctor, he hasn't been, convicted. He hasn't been prosecuted. He hasn't been indicted. I mean, those are the facts, right? You're a facts-based guy, right? Those are facts.
Well, there's obviously mechanisms that you've laid out for that to happen.
Sure.
And so, I can't render legal opinions. I'm not a lawyer. You're probably not either.
No, I'm not either, but I'm a realist. The bottom line is nothing has been proven in a court of law. And yet so many people, you're not the only one. So many people keep saying he created this virus. This is on him, the research. And I say to myself, show me the real evidence that can be proven in a court of law. But let's switch topics because I want to talk about vaccines with you. Would you agree with me that the vaccines for COVID have done far more good for people in this country than not good? There are so many people still that say the vaccines have killed millions of people, that all these professional athletes are dying of myocarditis, when it's just not true. So would you agree with me that the vaccines have done far more good for people than bad?
Well, what evidence do you have for that?
What evidence do you have that all these people are dying of the vaccines?
Well, let's take safety first, because we always discuss safety before efficacy. Would you agree with that?
Sure.
Yeah, right. So it doesn't matter how good a product is, it has to be safe. Would you agree with that?
I don't think there's any vaccination that's 100% foolproof safe. You know that.
Okay, but it would have to have acceptable safety. Would you agree with that?
It depends what your definition of acceptable safety is. We were in a global pandemic where at one point we were losing 5,000 Americans per day. So obviously these were extenuating circumstances, but go ahead.
But what would be your definition of acceptable safety?
Well, while I'm not a doctor and you are, I would say, in my personal opinion, looking back on half the world being vaccinated, in fact, more than half the world, as you know, at this point, there is no direct evidence that these vaccinations people are dropping dead left and right. And as you know, specifically on right-wing media and right-wing talk shows, they claim that all these professional athletes are dying of myocarditis because of the vaccines, when they don't even know if these people were vaccinated. They don't know their medical history. And it's frustrating for me, doctor, because I believe the vaccine saved my life. I believe it saved my parents' life. And in so many studies out there, listen, you could, and as you know this, you can get COVID if you're vaccinated. It didn't give you a lesser chance of getting infected or giving it to somebody else. However, you are in so many studies that I've seen, and you can tell me if you disagree, far less likely to get the effects of having to go into the ICU or possibly dying if you were vaccinated. Am I wrong?
Yeah, you're wrong. And here's the reason why. The prospective randomized double-blind placebo-controlled clinical trials of the vaccines never showed a reduction in severity. They never showed a reduction in hospitalization and death. And what's come out over time is the virus has mutated to become a much milder virus. So as the vaccines were rolling out, we were being confronted with a less mild virus. The other thing, a less severe virus, more mild. The other thing that happened is we learned how to treat the illness. So we treated patients early and we avoided hospitalization and death. So the two major things that saved people's lives were having natural immunity from the first round of infection and then early treatment. What happened with the vaccines, remember, the vaccines came in late, so we're already a year in the pandemic. We've been treating people for a year. The vaccines come in late. And in a recent paper by Norman Fenton from the UK, he's shown that there was tremendous misclassification bias. So when they declared that there was a epidemic of the unvaccinated, in fact, the hospitals weren't, they had no idea who was vaccinated or not. They didn't have connection to the CDC vaccine records. They weren't going in the ICU and figuring out people on the ventilator who were vaccinated and who weren't. In countries that actually did have the vaccine status, like the UK, they found far more vaccinated in the hospital on ventilators and dying than the unvaccinated. And in a paper by Shretha and colleagues from the Cleveland Clinic, the lowest risk workers that they have in 51,000 workers are the unvaccinated. And with every single injection, one is more and more likely to get COVID-19. Now, the deaths that have been reported after the vaccine are unprecedented. Our safety system for vaccines records on average, half the country takes vaccines in the United States before COVID, records on average 150 deaths in a year on average. The COVID-19 vaccines roll out. And as we sit here today, our CDC has verified 18,655 Americans dying after the vaccine. 1,150 die on the same day they take the shot. Some die in the vaccine center. 1,200 die the next day. Now, that's underreported by a factor in FDA testimony of about 30. We're looking, as we sit here today, at 550,000 plus Americans have died after the vaccine. So the same pattern is seen worldwide. There are calls to pull these vaccines off the market. They're so grossly unsafe because people die quickly after taking them. I'm telling you as a doctor and as a person of authority, you need to listen, person of authority, that these vaccines are not safe for human use. They didn't save lives. They've cost people their lives.
Okay, but here's my question. Of those 550,000 people that died, do you have direct evidence that they died from the vaccine? People die after vaccines. It doesn't mean that they died from the vaccine necessarily, right?
Sure.
Right?
There's over 400 peer-reviewed manuscripts from VAERS where all the vignettes are analyzed. I've published some of them. I've published the largest autopsy study. Yes, the vast majority are directly caused by the vaccine. These people take the shots. I told you 1,150 die in the vaccine center or a few hours later. It's the vaccine killing large numbers of people.
So what percentage of people that have gotten the vaccine with evidence have died from getting the vaccine? What percentage of people are dying from getting vaccinated? Do you have that information?
Well, we have very good data from the CDC VSafe system. Now, 10 million Americans signed up to report what's going on with the vaccine. What we know there is that, again, the CDC doesn't want to release the data to you as an American, so they're forced under court order to release it. 7.7% of people take the shot, get so sick that they end up in the ER, urgent care, or are hospitalized. So
7% of people after getting the vaccine end up in the ICU? I don't know one person that has gotten the vaccine that's gone to the ICU.
Yeah, I know dozens. Probably in my practice, hundreds.
How many people? Okay, so you know dozens. How many people do you know that have been vaccinated?
Well, listen. 7.7% from the CDC.
No, doctor, I get what you're saying, but you're not answering my question. You just said you know dozens of people that have been vaccinated and then have gone to the hospital. How many people do you know that have been vaccinated? I would imagine you know hundreds of thousands probably, or at least thousands, right? How many people do you know, doctor, that have been vaccinated? You just said you know dozens of people that have gone to the hospital. So my question to you is, how many people do you know that have been vaccinated that haven't gone to the hospital?
Well, I know a higher percentage of people who were unvaccinated and didn't go to the hospital either.
I know, but that wasn't my question. You just said dozens of people went to the hospital after getting vaccinated. I believe you. I believe you, doctor. But I would imagine you know thousands of people that were vaccinated that haven't gone to the hospital. Is that not a fair statement to make?
Listen, if it's 7.7%,
Okay. You don't
who
want to tell
take
me.
the shot, listen, you can do the math. If it's 7.7% of people who go to the urgent care, ER, or be hospitalized, that's CDC vSafe data. If that's the percentage, you can do the subtraction. That's within your
I understand.
capability of doing that. But my point is 7.7% is unacceptably high. Now you're asking how many people have died after the vaccine. The estimates are 550,000 plus in the United States is unprecedented. Now with COVID, we've had 1.2 million deaths of people test positive. Our CDC
Correct.
says about 10% of those would be adjudicated as COVID pneumonia.
Yeah.
So we're looking at 120,000 COVID deaths, 550,000 vaccine deaths. That's not a favorable proposition.
Okay, let's go back to that
Dennis Rancourt worldwide
Yep.
out of Montreal has the worldwide vaccine death number at 17 million. Would you think that's acceptable? Are you telling me the vaccines are saving lives? Is that what you're saying?
Well, me personally, in my personal opinion, yes, sir. I think the vaccines do save lives. Let's go back to the 7.7% that you just mentioned. Is there direct evidence? Now, all you're telling me is that they were vaccinated and they went to the ICU. That doesn't, when I hear that, that doesn't necessarily mean they're in the ICU because of the vaccination. They might have happened to be vaccinated, but how can you correlate that to it must have been because of the vaccine? Where is the evidence of proof that of those 7% or 7.7%, the only reason why they're in the ICU is because they got vaccinated? You know that's not true.
Now, remember the CDC vSafe data, and I've said 7.7% take the vaccine, and within a few hours or a few days get so sick, they go to urgent care, ER, or hospitalized. Now, you're saying ICU. I'm saying urgent care, ER, or hospitalized.
Okay.
The vignettes have been released, and yeah, it's the vaccine because it happens very quickly. These are known vaccine injury syndromes in the peer-reviewed published literature, thousands of papers. We're talking acute myocarditis and cardiac arrest, blood clots, pulmonary embolism, stroke, immunologic problems. So these are well-characterized vaccine injury syndrome. So yes, the vaccine is the cause.
So what would you say the percentage is, I think I asked you this, of those that are vaccinated that die in your estimation because of getting vaccinated directly? What percentage of people? If I have 1,000 people that get vaccinated, all sorts of different ages, all sorts of different health, different types of people at different ages, per 1,000 people, in your opinion right now, how many people are dying from getting vaccinated?
Well, we'll take 550,000 Americans have died. That's catastrophic. That's the Civil War casualties. And you divide it by everybody who took a vaccine.
On their death certificate, does it say cause of death, vaccinations of those 550,000 people?
Well, the autopsies that have done, the broadest autopsy study done so far, the number is 73.9% of those who die after a vaccine. The vaccine's the cause of death. And of those, the cardiac cases, it's 100%. So, yeah.
So 73% of those 550,000 people that have died are directly due to COVID or the vaccines. I'm sorry. Is that what I'm getting from you?
That's the best application we have. Now, listen, the CDC has all the data.
Yeah.
They can verify every single case. Now, these are they can verify every single case they have in this system. They have 18,655. Again, it's underreported 30-fold. So if I have a patient who takes the vaccine and they're found dead at home, the paramedics take them, off to the funeral home, and we can't get the vaccine card. We can't report it. So again, that's the reason why there's an underreporting factor that's substantial.
But you're saying that there's at least 400,000 people in this country since the COVID vaccines on their death certificate says cause of death vaccine. Is that what you're claiming?
No, 550,000.
And you said 74%, or I'm sorry, go ahead.
Right. So 550,000 Americans have died after the COVID-19 vaccine. That's an estimate. Okay,
right.
That's an estimate.
Which doesn't mean they died of the vaccine, but go ahead.
Okay, but they die, and a percentage of them, if we take the CDC VAERS data, it's a substantial percentage, 10 or 15% die on the same day they take it. You're right. They could have died in a car accident. A percentage of them die in the vaccine center. They do CPR and they finally, they stop they stop resuscitative efforts.
No, I understand what you're saying, but I think this is
Right.
a really important question to ask, and that's why I'm asking it to you. Of this 550,000 people, how many of those people on their death certificate with a doctor that knows their medical history, which obviously we don't, a doctor who knows how old they were, the circumstances surrounding their death, it actually says on the death certificate that they died from the vaccine? That, I think this is a really important question.
It's an important question, and you're right. The CDC needs to tell us.
Okay, so that's my question, doctor. The CDC hasn't told you, so you're assuming, and at least it sounds like to me, that you're making an assumption that they probably died from the vaccine when you don't even have that information. You don't have it on their death certificate. You're claiming that the CDC might be withholding that information, but don't you think it's a gross assumption to say that they all died from the vaccine because they were vaccinated?
Well, we have the largest autopsy study done. I'm the senior author on it, so I'm not assuming that. I'm just
How many autopsies were done? How many?
About 300.
So out of 550,000 people, you did a study of 300 people, and now you're making an assumption that all these 550,000 people might have died from the vaccine when you don't have that information from the CDC, and you find that to be responsible?
Sure. Yeah. We generalize.
Okay, well, I think that's ridiculous.
No, it doesn't matter what you think.
It kind of does.
We generalize from smaller samples to bigger samples. That's part of what we do and what's done in epidemiology. Now, the CDC holds all the data. Now, importantly, Pfizer has data too. So Pfizer was responsible for 90 days of data after release of their vaccine. Okay, 90 days. So this is a regulatory dossier. And do you know what Pfizer did after 90 days?
What did they do?
Nothing. They didn't release the information. This was.
I wish you got, let me be very clear, and we'll agree on this. I wish you got all the information and everything was completely transparent for you, doctor. I'm with you on that 150%. The only point I'm trying to make here is you're making the claim, at least it sounds like to me, and you tell me if I'm wrong, that of the 550,000 people that have died that have been vaccinated, you're making an assertion because you did a study of 300 people, which I would love to read, that all those people, or the majority of them, must have died from getting vaccinated. And I find that to be a gross assumption.
Now, Pfizer did not release their 90-day data. And they were under court order forced to release the data after the FDA did not want them to release the data. And within 90 days, Pfizer had 1,223 deaths where people like me, doctors, patients, and others called Pfizer and said the vaccine just caused a death in a person who just.
Doctor, I get it. I get what you're saying. I'm with you.
That's a large number of deaths.
I get it.
Within 90 days.
I get it. I'm with you.
There are 4,000 peer-reviewed papers in the literature describing fatal and non-fatal vaccine injury syndromes. I'm the senior author on a recent one on myocarditis. And in that paper, we summarize reports, case series of reports in the peer-reviewed literature, and there is a fatality rate to myocarditis. It's somewhere between 2 and 5%. So these are large numbers for a vaccine that never reduced death, that never reduced hospitalization, but yet offered an opportunity for someone to die after taking the shot.
Again, I understand what you're saying. I just respectfully disagree with you when you say that the vaccines didn't save lives or more people died from the vaccines. But let me ask you a question. What are your thoughts on the White Coat Summit? Did you agree with those doctors that in the White Coat Summit that did that press conference? Because that was somewhat controversial. I always wanted to ask you your opinions on that.
What statement are you talking about?
Dr. Stella Emanuel and many others that talks about hydroxychloroquine and other drugs. These were doctors that many people gave credibility to. Dr. Stella Emanuel specifically talked about demon sperm. She talked, about how women could get pregnant in their sleep. And there were a lot of people that gave these doctors credibility. In fact, it was Dr. Nick Sawyer, the group's founder, who said they were anti-mask, they were anti-lockdown. They wanted everybody to believe that it was safe to continue life as normal. It was anti all the public health measures that had been put out as guidance to help prevent the transmission of this virus. Do you agree with Dr. Stella Emanuel, or do you take the side of Dr. Nick Sawyer on that?
Yeah, I haven't reviewed either one.
Mhm.
I can tell you though, regarding masks, the public masking was carefully analyzed in the Cochrane analysis. Over 80 studies, public masking didn't have any effect at all. Even our CDC agrees. Our CDC now says the only time to wear a mask is when we're in respiratory isolation, largely so we don't give the patient a secondary staphylococcal infection. So that's, that handles masks.
Yeah.
The lockdowns and social distancing analyses from Johns Hopkins show they were a complete waste of time. They didn't help anything. They didn't certainly curtail the pandemic. What did work was early treatment, early multi-drug treatment. A paper by Gukliakos and colleagues showed by December of 2020, we had clear and convincing evidence that early multi-drug treatment worked. It wasn't dependent on any single drug, but drugs in combination, and starting impressively with nasal sprays and gargles, and then we worked through the antivirals. So I can tell you broadly, the public health response in the United States was wrong across the board. They were wrong on masking, social distancing, and lockdown. They were wrong on vaccines. They never supported early treatment, and people like you suffered.
Well, I mean, again, I would agree to disagree on that one. But let me ask you this: if that's true, then why did over 8 out of 10 doctors and nurses like yourself, since you claim that the vaccines were so dangerous and some people characterize it as poison, why did 8 out of 10 doctors and nurses and those in the medical field get vaccinated? Are they all wrong and you're right?
The vast majority of medical institutions had mandates. They had to.
Well, if they thought it was poison and they would die, wouldn't they just, quit their job or wait? Well, I guess that's my point to you. Why would so many in the medical field take the vaccines? Are they all wrong and are you right? I mean, they took the vaccines. Many of them are doing just fine. I mean, why would they take it? I guess that's my question.
Well, many have died, sadly. Macus and colleagues have kept careful track in Canada, where they have very good data. They know who took the vaccine in Canada. And they have over 180 dead Canadian doctors. This has been reported to the Royal College of Physicians there. This is an astounding. It's mainly, young people like you dropping dead after they take the vaccine. So not all the doctors.
I guess that's where we disagree. That's the biggest disagreement. When I hear people use the term, they drop dead after taking the vaccine. I want actual real evidence that there was a direct correlation between taking the vaccine and dying. And if it's not on their death certificate, people die, as you know, doctor, every day. People die on the basketball court, the playing fields. Sadly, it happens and you're a heart doctor, so you know this better than anybody. It could be an enlarged heart. It could be a number of different things, right? And when people say dropped dead, must have died from the vaccine, it's just my personal opinion, and we can disagree on this. I find it extremely irresponsible unless we have direct evidence and we know that they died from the vaccine. If a soccer player drops dead and we know he was vaccinated, soccer players have died in the past, way before the COVID vaccinations, but so many people assume must have died from the vaccine. Do you see where I'm going with that? Does that make sense?
We should safely assume it is the vaccine. Remember, we should have a culture of safety. A paper by Hulsher and colleagues of those who died of these cardiac deaths, and they have an autopsy, and the autopsy is fairly reviewed by independent reviewers. Yeah, it's 100% it's due to the vaccine. The case of Oscar Cabrera Adames, he's the Dominican player. He's playing in Spain. He doesn't want to take the vaccine. He's forced to take it to play. He takes the vaccine. He has a cardiac arrest on the court, and he's resuscitated. And then he messages out, I got myocarditis from the vaccine. It caused a cardiac arrest.
His family said he did not have myocarditis, by the way.
I'm just taking what he says. And
I'm just telling you what his family said. He did not.
His family may have been influenced by some powerful individuals who don't want the information to come out.
That could be a conspiracy.
Then he's on a medical treadmill test, and he dies 2 years later. Listen, I'm a cardiologist. I see these patients in my office every day. The vaccine is damaging the heart. This is now abundantly obvious in the peer-reviewed literature. It's causing large numbers of deaths. We should be conservative and assume the vaccine is causing death and investigate, as opposed to doing what you're doing. You're assuming it's not the vaccine.
No, I'm just a proof person. No, I'm just an evidence proof-based person, and I assume you are as well. And I don't assume anything when it comes to somebody's health. I don't assume just because somebody dies on a court or somebody claims they have myocarditis, when, by the way, he had no idea whether he had myocarditis or not. He heard from people like you, with all due respect, assuming that he had myocarditis. There's no direct medical evidence that he had myocarditis, but yet you're making an assumption, and you think it's okay in the medical field to assume that 550,000 people, doctor, have died from the vaccines when you did a study of 300 people. I find that to be extremely irresponsible on your part. And listen, I'm not the only one that feels that way. As the doctor who I just mentioned, Dr. Nick Sawyer, said, you're a Texas cardiologist who promotes ivermectin as part of a multi-drug protocol aimed at early treatment of COVID to outpatients, despite the FDA and the CDC's warning that people should not be taking ivermectin at all for COVID-19 treatment outside of a clinical trial. And I ask you again, why is the CDC wrong? Why is the FDA wrong? Why are 85% of doctors and nurses wrong? Why are they all wrong, but you, not an infectious disease doctor, is right?
Well, I'm the most published among all the individuals you mentioned. It
doesn't matter how much you've published, doctor. I mean, go ahead.
Well, I'm just, the publication track record is the prima facie evidence of having expertise. I've treated thousands of individuals, hydroxychloroquine supported by over 300 studies now, ivermectin over 100 studies. The FDA has just retracted all its information on its false claims on ivermectin. Those two drugs were used in McCullough protocol, but so was Paxlovid, molnupiravir, monoclonal antibodies. And so, again, no single drug was necessary nor sufficient, but they were needed to treat patients early to prevent hospitalization and death. I'm not alone. The Association of American Physicians and Surgeons strongly backed early treatment from the very beginning. They had the first home treatment guide in October of 2020. I'm not alone because the World Council for Health globally supported early treatment. We had protocols coming out of Central America from Dr. Eugenia Barentio, South Africa, Dr. Chetty, Dr. Didier Reynolds in France. We collaborated all over the world. So no, I'm not alone. The medical community is mixed on this. There is a contingent of doctors who will side with you and say, you know what, we should never have treated COVID. We should have let everybody come in the hospital who got sick. Some will die in the hospital, and we should have waited for a vaccine. There will be doctors who side with you, but I respectfully disagree. I wanted to treat patients early. Hospitalization is a bad outcome, as you can attest, and it was avoidable with early treatment.
I don't think there's anything wrong with respectfully disagreeing. My problem is people that make money off of this, these people that sell books, these people that make all these national media appearances on right-wing outlets that try to make a name for themselves and grow their social media and try to make money off of COVID. Now, that could be a whole host of different people. I don't like that. I respect the people on the front lines, and I know that you've been doing this for a very long time, and you've treated a lot of patients, and I appreciate you doing that. But I think you get my point, where there are a lot of people out there with no medical credentials. There are a lot of people that have huge platforms that say things that are just not true. And all I'm coming from is the point of, I want evidence. I want proof. I don't want a study of 300 people and assume that 550,000 people have died because they were vaccinated. I don't want to take the word of an athlete that there's no evidence that he had myocarditis, but because he said he did and he was vaccinated, we all should assume that he died from the vaccination. I just find that dangerous, doctor. I know we're going to agree to disagree on that, but
yeah, the reason why you're dangerous is you're not telling me why they died. We have 150 people before COVID per year who would die after a vaccine. Rare allergic reaction can happen.
Sure.
And now we've got 18,655.
Because half the world took the vaccine.
No. Listen, this is the United States. Listen, half the country takes a flu shot. We don't have 18,000 deaths after a flu shot. Where you have a culture of safety, unless you can tell me what 18,000 Americans die of, unless you have some evidence they died of something else, we safely assume they're dying due to the vaccine, and we get the vaccine off the market.
I don't know if would you consider that a safe assumption?
Yes, we have to be safe. When there's a new drug, this is the genetic code for the lethal part of the virus, with no ability to turn off the genetic code once it's generated in the body. It's a dangerous mechanism of action. We should assume that it's the vaccine. We have a conservative. We have a culture of safety. I chaired data safety monitoring boards in my career, and I can tell you, the FDA told me specifically, listen, McCullough, someone dies after taking this, you assume it's new to the new drug. You don't assume it's not, especially when the drug and this vaccine has a dangerous mechanism of action. We should assume it's due to the vaccine. That's being safe and conservative.
Okay, well, again, I would just go to their death certificate. I would go to their medical professionals that knew their medical history. I think that's more important than anything. I am not going to sit here and say that nobody's died from the COVID vaccines. Of course, there are people that have died. As you know, there's negative effects to every vaccine. There's always going to be a risk. And I agree with you on that, doctor. Again, we're going in circles. All I simply say is look at all the people that took the COVID vaccinations compared to the flu shot. Look at all the people that have had complications from COVID, people that still have long COVID, people that I know personally. I'm not the same person I was before I had COVID. And then I look at their medical history, as I'm sure you would, and to make an assumption that because someone took the vaccine and died, they must have died from the vaccine. I want someone doing an autopsy. I want somebody that knows their medical history. I want somebody that knows all the circumstances surrounding their death. I agree with you, doctor. It's unfortunate if you're not getting all the information from the CDC, from a Pfizer. I'm with you 150%. Investigate it. Let's get all the information. But with that being said, I'm not going to sit here and say 550,000 people died because they were vaccinated either, because I think that's a gross mischaracterization.
Well, it could be as much as 550,000. It could be more. It could be less. But the point is, it's a very large number. We should never be talking about large numbers of deaths after a vaccine. We should never have this conversation. 150 for everybody who takes a flu shot, every kid who takes a childhood vaccine schedule. That's a massive number of injections.
But I know you didn't agree with all the closures. This will be, I know you got to run, doctor. Last question for you, and I appreciate your time, by the way. During COVID, when we had 4,000 to 5,000 deaths a day, right? The peak of COVID deaths, you would have been okay with 60,000 people in a stadium watching a football game unvaccinated. You would have been okay with nobody wearing masks, nobody vaccinated, none of that stuff, everybody living their life normally. And you would have been totally okay with that. At that time, we were losing 4,000 to 5,000 people a day. You wouldn't have wanted any type of parameters at all during that time.
Well, sick people shouldn't be going to the stadium. They should be getting early treatment.
Of course.
Recall that most of the deaths, a large fraction, came from nursing homes, congregate living facilities. They weren't in football stadiums like you.
But people could catch the virus and then go home and give it to other people. It would help spread the virus. You would agree with that, right?
Well, listen, we all got it. 97 point, probably 99% of Americans got it.
Yeah.
So it was ridiculous, this idea that you weren't going to get it. We were all going to get it. It was about getting early treatment. Mm-hmm. That's the most important thing. It turns out the single greatest intervention that could reduce spread was virucidal and static nasal sprays and gargles, believe it or not. So everybody should have probably been using a nasal spray and gargle after coming home from the football stadium. But keep the football stadiums open. The Great Barrington Declaration was correct. We should have protected the seniors, high-risk people in congregate living facilities. So the pandemic response was wrong. Shutting down the football stadiums was wrong. Shutting down the schools was wrong. And we should have taken a much different approach.
Well, doctor, I'll say this. It's an important debate. It's an important conversation. You're certainly not afraid to have these type of debates, and I respect you for that. I really do. Perhaps down the road we could have another conversation. It certainly is a good one. We hope we never get back to the days where, this pandemic was a terrible one. And sadly, I'm sure you know a lot of people that lost their lives, as do I. It's tragic. It's terrible. And I appreciate the conversation, doctor, and I really do appreciate your time, and I appreciate you coming on this show. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. That's Dr. Peter McCullough, everybody. Obviously, we disagree on a lot of things, and we're going to discuss that when we come back, but I do appreciate him taking the time to come on the show and to talk about it. Oh, boy, I'm sure we have a lot of people fired up that want to talk about this, so we should probably clear the phone lines and talk about this specific topic. Your thoughts on my interview? Boy, that was an interesting one with Peter McCullough. Before I take a quick break, I want to tell you guys about my good friends at Pioneer Air. Scheduled maintenance, you're going to get it for free. Free scheduled maintenance on your air conditioning system if you call right now and ask to speak to Leo and tell you heard about it from this show. They're a company that's been around since the 1930s, and you're going to get free scheduled maintenance for up to a year. 702-703-6346. Again, call Pioneer Air, 702-703-6346. I'm going to give you another number, and that's the number of this radio show. That was an interesting interview. I'm getting my phone's blowing up. 702-221-7283. And again, that number, 702-221-7283 is the number to call. Your thoughts on my interview with controversial Dr. Peter McCullough. When we come back, it's Pushing the Limits. Did you know that 99% of air conditioning issues start with airflow issues? Well, guess what? Pioneer Air has your back. They've been operating for 20 years in the industry within the Las Vegas area, large enough to handle all your air conditioning and heating needs, but small enough to know your first name. Pioneer Air focuses on preventative care, much like wellness checks for humans. They believe in wellness checks for air conditioning and heating systems to extend the life of the system you own. So what are you waiting for? Schedule your wellness check with Pioneer Air today. The number to call is 702-831-4840. Here's the best news. Mention this ad and you'll receive 10% off. Call Pioneer Air today. 702-831-4840. That number again, 702-831-4840.
My name is Hunter Kane, and I'm talking with you for a call to action for our veterans in Clark County. Who is Hunter Kane? Well, I'm a decorated combat veteran, veteran community leader, and candidate for Clark County Commission. You know, no veteran has served on the commission in nearly 30 years, which is why our veteran homelessness, unemployment, and suicide rates are out of control. So here's the call to action. June 11th, vote veteran, vote Kane for Clark County. Let's rally behind someone who's been in the trenches, who knows the sacrifices, and who's committed to making a real difference. Join the campaign by searching Elect Hunter Kane on social media or go to www.electhunterkane.com.
Buying or selling a home is a huge life event that requires guidance from an expert in the industry and community. My name is Blake Wynn. You may recognize my name as my grandfather was the best governor the state of Nevada has ever had. Growing up in Las Vegas, I've come to know this community intricately. Now, I am raising a family here as well, so I understand all the issues impacting our home and quality of life. As the top realtor for the #1 real estate team at Keller Williams, you can have confidence in my experience, knowledge, and track record. When it comes to buying, selling, or investing in real estate, choose a name you can trust and someone who understands the community you call home. Call Blake Wynn today and experience the difference of a trusted expert. 702-540-3311.
Welcome back to Pushing the Limits. Please check out my friends at Jackson's Bar and Grill, located in Flamingo and Jones. I was there yesterday. I had a great lunch. The chicken Alfredo there is amazing. Great gaming, great bartenders, great employees. Jackson's Bar and Grill, located in Flamingo and Jones. You know, I did something with Dr. Peter McCullough. I'm sorry. I'm just going to pat myself on the back for this one. That nobody else does. They don't know how to challenge somebody like that. He made the claim, which is obviously not true, that up to 550,000 people in this country have died from the vaccine. And I said, Doctor, do you have direct evidence that they died from the vaccine? No, he doesn't. Just that they were vaccinated. How absurd is that? And then I said, where's your evidence? He said, well, the CDC's
not giving me enough evidence. And then he used the term, I'm going to assume. No doctor should assume anything. You know what they say about assumptions? It makes an ass out of you and me. I don't think he made an ass out of me. And then he talks about this athlete that died months after getting the vaccination. Well, you said he had myocarditis. The family says he did. There was no evidence he had myocarditis. Again, Dr. Peter McCullough spreading medical disinformation. And he claims he's going to assume that all these people have died from the vaccines when he has no direct evidence. He just makes an assumption that because they were vaccinated, they must have died from the COVID vaccination. Ridiculous. He was just exposed. And then when I asked him over and over again, where's your proof? Where's your evidence? Where's your proof? Where's your evidence? His only response, I'm going to assume. I don't have the death certificates. I don't know. And I'm just going to make an assumption. And I did a study of 300 people. Is that evidence-based? No, of course it's not. And why did I bring up the idea of making money off of this? Because Dr. Peter McCullough has strengthened his social media following, which he had none several years ago. He's written books. He's made money off that, going on book tours on the right-wingers. The right-wingers out there won't challenge him the way I do. This doctor is dangerous. He's dangerous. Why? Because he makes gross assumptions, and I called him out on it. 702-221-7283 is the number to call. Let's start off with Joseph. What do you guys think about this interview? Let's start off with Joseph. Joseph, what's going on? Hi, Joseph. Joseph isn't ready. Let's go to Carl. Carl is next. Hi, Carl.
Let me tell you something. I have a medical background. I was vaccinated. My wife was vaccinated. Every relative I know was vaccinated, plus boosted. You don't think we would have done that if we. But you won't get near the case that if you're not vaccinated. And I know many doctors, and they all agree, most of the people who go into the hospital who did go into the hospital with COVID, it was the unvaccinated ones who died.
Well, he wasn't going to play that game with me that, well, your opinion doesn't matter and that I'm just going to assume, so I'm right and everybody else is wrong. And then when I said, why have 8 or 9 out of 10 doctors taken the vaccinations, he said, well, they had to. No, nobody was forced to do anything. They could have to work somewhere else, or they could have taken a break. He makes the claim that these vaccinations were more dangerous. By the way, thank you for the call, Carl. I appreciate you. He makes the claim that all these vaccinations were they're so dangerous and all these people have died, but then he says up to 550,000. You know what that's like me saying? It's like me saying I have up to $5 million in my bank account, right? I could have $1 in my bank account, but I have up to 5 million. Oh, but Brian, you have to give us evidence that you have millions of dollars in the bank. Well, the bank isn't giving me enough information. The bank isn't giving me enough information on my bank account, so I'm going to assume that I'm a millionaire. That's exactly what Dr. Peter McCullough said. The CDC isn't giving him enough information about these people's deaths. By the way, they don't have to because it's personal and it's about one individual person in their medical history. Dr. McCullough should not be privy to that information, but he thinks he should. And if he doesn't get at that information, he's going to assume that the CDC is covering it up, and he's going to assume that people have died because they got vaccinated. Do you hear me out on this? How ridiculous this is? 702-221-7283. Let's go to Joseph. Joseph, are you there?
Yeah. Hey, Brian.
Hey.
Calling from California. And speaking of that interview, I took the vaccine myself, and my folks took the vaccine, and it didn't stop me. I'm still standing.
As am I. As am I.
I know, it's like, I don't care what those people say. I don't care what the MAGA Republicans will say about the vaccine kills people. But the only thing I wish I would have done is video myself still standing.
I agree. Joseph, am I wrong? We just had the doctor who said up to 550 million people have died from getting vaccinated in this country. And then when I pushed him for evidence, he had none. None. He just made a gross assumption. And by the way, he said that word himself, assume, multiple times in that interview. And his only evidence was allegedly he did this 300-person study, which I've never heard of. And then he claims the CDC didn't give him enough information. So he makes an assumption that all these people have died from the vaccines.
Well, I guess that explains why the words assume and assumption has the ASS words.
Yeah.
some letters, actually.
You're right. You're right.
And also, I remember watching your episode on YouTube yesterday about that 1864 ban. I'm guessing I do believe that this is what Trump and the MAGA Republicans are going for, despite the fact that Trump says he just wants to let the states decide.
Yeah.
Makes me think this is what Trump is doing. He's seeking retribution against women who voted against him.
Yeah.
And even against Taylor Swift, who's been in front of the Time magazine cover instead of him.
I'm with you, my friend. I'm with you 150%. Good to hear from you, Joseph. 702-221-7283. Very controversial doctor we had on the line, Dr. Peter McCullough. I believe I'm the first person who's actually truly challenged him and caught him in a lie. Up to 550,000 people have died from the vaccines. He has no direct evidence of that. He claims the CDC hasn't given him enough, so he's just going to make a gross assumption. He used the term, I assume. It means you're lying. 702-221-7283. Let's go to Matt. What's up, Matt?
Hi there. No, I was. My wife is very enthralled with your show here, and listening to the idiot Dr. Pete with 550,000 people. If this was manufacturing, to have a staple result, you'd have to have done 11,000 to 17,000, not 300.
Exactly. And I called him on that. Yep.
To get a sample that's acceptable.
You are so right. You are so right. And Joe Rogan, when he appeared on Joe Rogan's show and that went viral, Rogan is a beefcake moron. He didn't challenge him on anything. I'm not a doctor. I don't have medical expertise, but I'm smart enough to understand when someone says up to 550,000, it's an idiotic statement. Like I said, I could say I have up to $5 million in the bank. And then if someone asks me for evidence, my claim, this is exactly what Peter McCullough said, is I'm going to assume I'm a millionaire because the bank isn't giving me enough information. He claimed because the CDC isn't giving him enough information, so he claims. By the way, it's not his business on someone's death certificate or medical history, which I would assume he doesn't know probably any of these people, their medical history. And then I caught him in another lie. I don't know if you caught this. There was an athlete that he was speaking of who died after getting the vaccine, right? He claimed he had myocarditis. His family has been interviewed and said there's no evidence he had myocarditis. The doctor spread more misinformation about this death, and that's what they do. These right-wing doctors, they spread their medical misinformation, and because he's a heart doctor, my opinion doesn't matter. All the infectious disease doctors out there don't matter, but this guy matters who's selling books and making money. It sickens me, and I exposed him.
And mRNA has been around for almost 40 years now.
Correct,
and highly successful.
Yep, correct.
And SARS has been around for how long? Back when Obama was president.
Yeah.
SARS is not new. So to say that Dr. Fauci created COVID-2.
Yeah. It's absurd.
Hello.
It's absurd. And I also challenged him on that. I said, I'm evidence-based. Just because somebody wrote a book, and I called him out on this because it was idiotic. He referenced Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s book, who I could, by the way, use that book as toilet paper, and Rand Paul, an eye doctor. And these are the two guys he references in claiming that Dr. Fauci intentionally created COVID. And I called him out on it. I said I could give 2 Fs about Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s book, who has 0 medical experience, and Rand Paul, who's an eye doctor. And I also called him out. He's a heart specialist. I respect that. He's not an infectious disease doctor. Thank you for calling. I feel bad for you that your wife is a fan of my show and obsessed with my show. I'm sorry. So sorry, sir. I'm kidding. Thank you for calling in. 702-221-7283 is the number to call if you want to be a part of the conversation. Palm is next. Palm, thanks for calling in. What's on your mind?
I think it's Tom, and I'm from Syracuse. Tom. I called you. I called you a couple shows ago.
Sorry about that. Sorry, Tom. Go right ahead.
Yeah, it's okay. But anyways, nasal spray and gargle. Is he an effing idiot? I drive Uber for a living. Well, I'm retired now, and I caught COVID in December at Christmas time in Minnesota. I was around my future sister-in-law, and she had it. She didn't know she had it, and I caught it. but I'm in an Uber car with 20 people a day, and I always wear a mask, and it started in 2020, and I never got COVID. So according to this quack doctor, I should take my mask off and gargle and nasal spray, and then I don't have to worry about the person in the back seat.
Tom, I forgot he said that.
Inside my car.
Tom, I forgot he said that at the end of the interview. My mind was spinning, but he actually said that people should have taken nasal spray and gargle, and he actually believes that stuff is better than the vaccine. He actually believes that, and we need to call him out on that. And again, Joe Rogan and those that have interviewed him that have coddled this guy, I refuse to do that, and I do believe in a respectful way. I challenged him enough to put him in a corner, and he sounded like a complete idiot, Tom. He sounded like a complete idiot, like what you characterize him as, because that's what he is. He's an idiot.
Yeah, Brian, also, what he said to you near the end of your interview with him was totally uncalled for. I don't know if you caught it, but he said, and I wrote it down here because it made my head want to explode again. He said, it doesn't matter what you think.
Oh, I heard him, and I said, actually, it does.
It doesn't matter what you think. Yeah. And a doctor would say that to a patient.
I did hear him say that.
It doesn't matter what you think.
I did hear him say that, and I did respond. I said, yes, it does matter what I think, but I'm glad you caught that.
Right.
The disrespect and the ego of this guy, he probably was okay with Donald Trump talking about injecting yourself with disinfectant, too. Tom, thank you for the call, my friend. Appreciate you. 702-221-7283 is the number to call. Again, 702-221-7283. Let's go to Kava, who's next up on Pushing the Limits. Hello, Kava.
Hi, Brian. How are you doing today?
Good. What's on your mind, man?
I only have two things. I have two things to say. First thing, what the hell was that interview?
Yeah, I mean, it's important for me. So some people will say, why are you giving this guy a platform? Well, first of all, it's important to expose these people, number one. Number two, he's done interviews on Joe Rogan. He's been on Fox News. He's been on Sean Hannity. He's been on all the right-wing entities. He didn't know who I was, which I'm happy for that. He didn't know what I do. He probably was a little bit surprised the way that I challenged him. But I put him in a corner. There were multiple times in that interview. Up to 550,000 people have died from taking the vaccine in this. So are you saying 550? No, I'm saying up to. And his only excuse for believing that is an assumption, which he assumed. He's not getting enough information from the CDC, and he claims he did autopsies of 300 people. And you basing that and pushing it to 550,000, I'd love to know where he got that number from. It's absolutely absurd, and it's ridiculous.
Brian, and one more thing I was going to say. I used to work at Burger King, and I can't prove anything, but my Burger King is the best Burger King. I can give you that information because Burger King isn't giving me that information. But I can tell you, we have the best Burger King.
Yeah, exactly. I'm a multimillionaire. My bank isn't giving me enough information to prove that I'm a millionaire, but I'm a millionaire. I'm going to assume I'm a millionaire. Kava, you are 150% correct, my friend, and it's good to hear from you. Thank you. 702-221-7283 is the number to call. Who do we go to next year? Who's next? A guy by the name of Snowflake Liberal. Is that your name, sir? Is that your legal name? Hello, Snowflake Liberal. Earth to Snowflake Liberal. Are you there? Okay, so let's hang up on Snowflake Liberal. He's a waste of our time. 702-221-7283. This next call might be a waste of my time as well. Let's go to Hector. Hector is next up on Pushing the Limits.
Hey, Brian, here, let me say one thing right in the beginning. I'm not going to cuss at you. I'm not going to yell at you.
Well, you can. I'll just hang up on you. I mean, you can.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. But, here, right away, it kind of seems like you don't want to have this discussion. But
stop wasting time and make your point.
Here, in my opinion, this doctor is a hero and needs to be given some kind of Nobel Peace Prize, something.
Gotcha.
But let me tell you something.
Gotcha. He's a hero.
Let me ask you a question, Brian. What country had the lowest rates of COVID in the world?
Not the United States of America.
Do you know?
Not the United States of America. In fact, per capita, we had more deaths than many other countries in the world.
That's not what I asked you.
Okay.
What country had the lowest rates of COVID?
Okay. What country had the lowest rates of COVID? Are you claiming that it's the United States? Is that what you're claiming?
Here, I know you're trying to buy time to Google it, but here.
No, I'm not trying to. No, I'm not trying. Okay, I know, Doc. Okay, Dr. Hector, why don't you give me the answer, Dr. Hector? Give me the answer.
Let me take you to school.
Stop stuttering. Stop stuttering and answer the question, Doctor.
Let me take you here.
Stop stuttering.
Get on the short bus. Let me take you to school like the doctor.
Pot him down. Pot him down all the way. Hey, Hector. Hey, dumbass. You're not going to insult me. You're not smarter than me, Hector. You're not. You're a dumbass. You're not going to call into this show and play doctor with me. Okay? Now, I know you would like to characterize people like Donald Trump as heroes. I know you'd like to characterize people like a doctor who provides medical misinformation as a hero because you're a dumbass. I know that, Hector. You called into the show yesterday 8 times because you're an obsessed freak is what you are. You called into the show yesterday making your ignorant statements and remarks. I could care less, and my audience could care less whether you think Dr. Peter McCullough is a hero or not. The true heroes are the people on the front lines that don't do interviews to make money. They don't write books to make money. They don't go on right-wing tours to make money. The true doctors that are heroes are those that are saving lives right now. Names that you don't know. The ones on the front lines that aren't political, that are saving lives, like the doctors and the nurses that saved my life. Not some moron who goes on a book tour and try to get social media followers on Twitter. But Hector, you see, you're too dumb to understand that, aren't you, Hector? Hey, Hector, guess what? I'm going to take Dr. Peter McCullough's approach now. Are you ready for this, Hector? And I'm going to ask you a very serious question. I would be willing to bet your IQ is up to 20. I'm not saying it is 20. I'm just saying it's up to 20. And I don't have the information to prove it. How high is your IQ, Hector? Is it up to 20? It's up to 20, isn't it, Hector? Dr. Hector. Dr. Hector. Get off my show, you freaking idiot. Get off my show. You stupid fool. That's the guy, by the way, who thinks Donald Trump is his hero. 702-221-7283. And again, the number to call if you want to be a part of the conversation, 702-221-SAVE. Oh, boy, this could be a beauty, as Donald Trump would say. Let's go to Julie. MAGA Julie is next up on Pushing the Limits. What's up, Julie?
Hi, Brian. No, I disagree with the doctor. On this one, I disagree with the doctor because I am a registered nurse, and I have seen so many cases. COVID is still a mystery. We're still investigating. I follow Akiko Iwasaki. She's a doctor. And we have millions of people suffering from post-COVID symptoms. And we'll see, we don't have answers for those people. And I want people to understand that we cannot correlate vaccine to the dropping athletes because many people, if you are going to react to a vaccine, you do it immediately or minutes later, not months later. From my medical, knowledge, I'm a nurse. I've been a nurse since 2009, and no, I don't agree with the doctor. We don't know. COVID is still a mystery. We're still investigating because I have seen people with
what do you mean?
Cancer.
Okay, so can I ask you, when you say we're investigating, you're investigating? I'm trying to understand.
No, I'm trying. No, I have been studying and following.
Okay, so let me ask you some questions about the interview. When Dr. McCullough, who by the way is not an infectious disease expert, claims that up to 550,000 people have died from the vaccines, what would be your response to that?
I don't agree.
Okay.
I don't.
Well, I'm glad. Okay, let me ask you another one. I'm glad we agree on that. Obviously, it's ridiculous. By the way, we would both agree that every vaccine has its challenges and every vaccine has its dangers, right? You would agree that every vaccine is not. Okay, so we agree on the basic fundamentals. Let me ask you another question. Do you think it's safe for any doctor or surgeon or even nurse to make an assumption about something without factually based evidence? Because that's what Dr. Peter McCullough just said.
No.
Okay, so we are agreeing on this interview. Now, here's my problem, Julie. And by the way, I'm not saying you're one of these people because it sounds like we agree on this issue. So Dr. Peter McCullough, Julie, he has a huge following on social media just in the last several years. He appears on these right-wing shows, and he tries to make money by selling books. Would you agree with me that somebody who's trying to make money off of this might not be the most credible person?
I disagree with him. I disagree on everything. I mean, I have been following cases. I have seen a lot of patients, suffering from post-COVID. I have seen patients who had COVID and then get the vaccine and improve. We don't know. It's a mystery. They get the vaccine. They have been having lingering symptoms like foggy brain, memory issues, fatigue, chronic fatigue, and then they get the vaccine and they improve.
Yeah.
So
I think it's a case-by-case basis. The vaccines have
it's unpredictable because you have people who.
But hold on, Julie. Julie, hang on one
Uh-huh.
second. It is a very, very obvious point to make for anybody to say that the vaccines have saved lives and the vaccines have done far more good than bad. Anybody who tells you otherwise is not telling the truth. Now, there have been some negative effects, as there would be to any vaccine, but any respected doctor that would claim up to 550,000 people have died from taking the vaccine, and his only evidence is a 300-person study that he claims he conducted, not knowing any evidence of that person's medical history or the death certificate or anything, and then he just makes an assumption, is so harmful. It's so harmful, and it's medical disinformation, and I believe he's a kook. Yes, I'm going to say it. He's a kook. I think Dr. Peter McCullough is an embarrassment to this country.
I mean, we agree on this one, at least.
Well, Julie, I appreciate it.
Because I have seen people, Brent, I have seen people very healthy and die from COVID. And
Absolutely.
I have seen people with pre-existing conditions that have gone through COVID fine. And people who got COVID and no symptoms at all, and some other people that died.
You are correct, Julie. You are correct, and I am glad that we have some middle ground here and reasoning. And you sound like an extremely logical person in the medical field today. I got to say, I'm pleasantly surprised, Julie, and I appreciate you calling in. Look, we could all have differences of opinions. I've been very, very consistent on my opinions of COVID. And by the way, when Dr. Peter McCullough says my opinion doesn't matter, he's being a complete jerk. I was in, and I don't talk about this a lot, but I was in the ICU for 2 weeks. I know firsthand the doctors and the nurses who saved my life. They gave me antibodies. They didn't give me hydroxychloroquine. They gave me antibodies. They gave me vitamins. They gave me oxygen. They gave, and remdesivir. Remdesivir, I believe, saved my life. It's a proven drug that helped those COVID patients. And it's hard for me to talk about this because I don't think I've ever talked about it on the radio. But I remember when I was in the hospital and I was in the ICU and I didn't know if I was going to make it. I was in really bad shape. And I heard, this was maybe the second day, and I couldn't move. I was in the ICU. And across the hall from me, I heard some screaming and yelling and crying. And the nurse came in, as she would come in every hour to check up on me. And I asked her, I said, what's going on out there, And she told me. And she looked at me and she said, bad news. We have a young woman who just succumbed to COVID, and her parents were outside her room. And they weren't allowed to go in to her room to say goodbye to her. And I can't imagine how difficult that must have been. First of all, knowing that your daughter is dying and not even being able to go into the room to say goodbye to her. And I live with that nightmare every day. I hear those cries and those yells every day, especially when I talk about COVID. So for Dr. Peter McCullough to tell me that my opinion doesn't matter means that he can go to hell as far as I'm concerned, and it gets me angry now thinking about because I was very respectful to him. He was very disrespectful to me. Let me tell you something. It takes a certain type of person to try to profit and make money off of people dying and suffering. That's exactly what Dr. Peter McCullough has done. He's no hero. He's the opposite of a hero. Heroes save lives and they risk themselves and their careers to help others. Peter McCullough has done the opposite. He's sold books. He's made money. He's blown up his social media. And he's made a name for himself with his conspiracy theories. That's the opposite of a hero. And for any doctor, or really anybody in the medical field, to use a term like a car dealership would use, up to this, up to this, up to this, up to that, up to 550,000. And you're in the medical field, you can't be talking like that. Up to 550,000 people have died from the vaccines, he said. And then when I challenged him on it, he said, I'm assuming. I said, why? He said, because the CDC isn't giving me enough information. First of all, any doctor is not allowed to get the medical history of any person in this country after they have died. There are laws involved there. Number two, he said he did a study of 300 people. Who cares? Allegedly. I haven't seen the study. Maybe he did, maybe he didn't. So because you did your own biased study, yes, I think Dr. Peter McCullough is biased. He tries to force information out there that's controversial so it can make him more popular. That he's going to assume that up to 550,000 people have died from the vaccine. Hey, guess what? People die in this country every day. Some are vaccinated, some are not. People were dying way before the vaccines were out there. They were dying, they were dropping. But because they're dying now, we automatically assume it must have been the vaccinations. Let me tell you another story. I'm speaking to the Peter McCulloughs out there of the world. Tragic story. I believe she was 14 years old. It's a Vegas story. A beautiful young girl, 14 years old. I think she was a freshman or a sophomore in high school. She went out there on the playing field and she played soccer. And she dropped. And she died. It's a horrible story. The right-wing idiots out there, like the Wayne Allen Kooks of the world and many others, made the assumption that she must have been vaccinated and she must have died from the vaccines. Now, of course, I wasn't one of those people. Dr. Peter McCullough probably would have been one of those people. He would have used the term assume, right? Well, it turned out her family did some interviews, including her mother, who my heart goes out to, that her daughter had a rare heart illness. Her heart was enlarged. I forgot the name of the illness. And that she should have never gone on the field to begin with. And it had nothing to do with the vaccine. In fact, we learned that she wasn't even vaccinated. Did we hear any retractions from these morons out there that made it political or wanted to blame the vaccine? The Dr. Peter McCulloughs. Did we hear it from the Dr. Peter McCulloughs out there making an assumption? Did they retract? Did they say, geez, you know what, I'm sorry, I blamed the vaccine on this young girl's death. Turns out it wasn't the vaccine. She was unvaccinated. No. They didn't retract anything. Instead, what they did was they just blamed the vaccines on other deaths, just like Dr. Peter McCullough. And I'm sorry, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to say it again. For the first time, in my opinion, Dr. Peter McCullough was confronted and was challenged. He has not been challenged like the way he was challenged on this show today. And I am going to post that interview, and I'm going to take bits and pieces of it exposing Dr. Peter McCullough. And if he doesn't want to come on this show again, I don't care. He made gross assumptions, even by his own estimation. He assumes things. He said it multiple times in the interview. I said, how could you assume that? Where's your evidence? Oh, that person died 24 hours after the vaccine. So, people have died 24 hours after the flu vaccine and many other vaccines. Doesn't mean they died from the vaccine. There has to be evidence to prove that. But his evidence was a 300-person study that he conducted, allegedly. And his other form of evidence was that the CDC isn't giving him enough evidence. So because he's not getting enough information, it's okay for him to assume things. What did he say? Oh, it could be up to 550,000. It could be more. It could be less. Wow, that's spoken like a brilliant surgeon, a brilliant doctor that you are. Could be more. Could be less. I mean, it really is mesmerizing that people listen to people like that. And then, in the middle of the interview, who does he cite as reference, as point of reference? We're talking to a heart doctor. We're talking to someone who has a lot of medical expertise, maybe not infectious disease expertise. And who does he cite to back up some of his opinions? Did you hear who he mentioned? Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and Rand Paul. Let's start with Robert F. Kennedy Jr. The guy has zero medical experience. Let me repeat. The guy who Dr. Peter McCullough referenced has zero medical experience. He is a conspiracy theorist deemed by many in the medical field. And then he cites Rand Paul. The guy who has blamed Dr. Fauci for everything involved with coronavirus and the vaccines. What is Rand Paul's medical experience? He puts eye drops in your eyes. He's an eye doctor. It's like going to the MyPillow guy. Let's go to the MyPillow guy. I'm sure he has opinions on the vaccinations as well. Let's go to the MyPillow guy. Let's go to Kid Rock. I'm surprised Dr. Peter McCullough didn't talk about the MyPillow guy. This guy goes on all the right-wing entities and the right-wing podcasts. And by the way, he wants to say, well, you know, you being a journalist. Well, I'm no more of a journalist than Joe Rogan, who's a meathead, by the way. A meathead. It's a joke. But I'm going to start using Peter McCullough's approach since he's such a hero and he's so smart. I have up to 10 billion listeners on this show every day. But listen, I did a study, and I was on the air for 3 minutes, and I had 10,000 listeners. I did a study. And my other form of evidence is, listen, we just don't have all the evidence from the ratings books that come out. Now, some of you are probably laughing, and you should be, because it's ridiculous. That is exactly Dr. Peter McCullough's approach when it comes to the vaccines, to a T. I don't have enough evidence. The CDC is not giving me enough evidence. I did a study of 300 people, so I'm going to make the assumption that up to 550,000 people have died from the vaccines. It is so stupid, and it is so ridiculous, and it is so insulting. There are right-wing radio hosts, a half a dozen of them at least, that have died from COVID. It's terrible. They were anti-vaccine. They preached anti-vaccine rhetoric. I beg to offer to you, how many people have died in this country from COVID because they weren't vaccinated, because they listened to people like Dr. Peter McCullough? How many people have died in this country because they listened to that interview he did on Joe Rogan's show? Joe Rogan has blood on his hands. Dr. Peter McCullough has blood on his hands. Doctors aren't always going to be right. I get that. Doctors make mistakes. They're not always right. They could be wrong. If Dr. McCullough doesn't think masks work at all, then why do surgeons wear masks every day? I bet Dr. Peter McCullough wears a mask when he's performing, if he's performing a surgery, if he does do that. It's so dangerous. This COVID vaccine misinformation. And I will always call people out for not having the evidence, for not being evidence-based. Anyway. If you guys like what I do and you appreciate what I do, which I hope you guys do, and I appreciate all of you, subscribe to my YouTube page. It's at PTL Radio Show. Again, that YouTube page is at PTL Radio Show. Also, the Occupy Democrats Facebook fan page. Go there, subscribe for $5 a month. You're supporting what I do on the show. And I appreciate all of you for joining us. I will post that interview up on my YouTube page a little bit later today, and I will be putting portions up on there exposing a doctor who, in my opinion, is a complete and utter disgrace. And I will be doing that later today. I appreciate all of you watching us, following us. We are going to attempt to get the lady who gave Donald Trump a hug at Chick-fil-A today. I have contacted her, and I'm going to try to get her on the show. Yeah, that's right. Donald Trump did appear at Chick-fil-A, and he bought 30 milkshakes. Rumor is he drank them all himself. I don't know. I don't know if that's true or not. Allegedly, he had up to 30 milkshakes today at Chick-fil-A. We'll talk a little bit more. We'll talk a little bit more about that tomorrow. And I appreciate all of you tuning in. I appreciate everybody watching on all forms of social media. And we'll see you tomorrow. Same time, same place. Have a great day, everybody.